Ever heard about the scandal involving Wells Fargo? It's a big one, and it's worth knowing about. Essentially, Wells Fargo employees were caught creating millions of unauthorized accounts for their customers. This scandal is significant because Wells Fargo is one of the largest banks in the United States, serving a massive number of American households. Let's delve into what exactly happened. There is this person known as Mr. Henry Wells, with him Mr. William Fargo, and a third person named Mr. John Butterfield. The three of them were the owners of these self-owned express companies, which were separately competing on the East Coast in the year 1850. The trio determined that joining forces and taking their fiefdom on the East Coast by storm would be a brilliant strategy. This newborn company was then called American Express. Wells Fargo did not take long to catch sight of the California gold rush, which occurred 2 years later. As they were covering that area, it became apparent that San Francisco would be a great spot for their express enterprises. However, now Butterfield and a few other executive managers at American Express did not agree with him. They believed it too risky and with too much competition. Hence, Wells and Fargo chose to launch a Wells Fargo on the West Coast, which was also very similar to their first business. These were the beginning, and these are the roots of it. Thus, they get their name. I'm gonna jump almost 150 years ahead for the sake of time and simplicity. During the period, they had expanded their operations while the revenue was boosted by a great number of acquisitions. There were others as well, and more, the industry was consolidating. In 1998, Norwest Bank from Minneapolis bought Wells Fargo and then took the Wells Fargo name. Here, it may seem like a trivial element, but it's significant because it took Norwest's executive team, that is Richard Kavasovich, and later John Stumpf, to Wells Fargo. The strategy of Kavasovich at Norwest was different from the strategies of other banks, but was the same as the strategies of the previous banks. Unlike the usual business model, which is based on speed and convenience, Norwest highlighted the aspect of creating strong relationships with the customers. It was their view that the way they treated their customers had a significant impact on the propensity of the customers to have multiple accounts. This strategy, called cross-selling, suggested that if a client was pleased with a checking account, they might open a savings or retirement account with Norwest. Being able to gain trust and loyalty from customers was our main goal. The initial response of the customers of the Wells Fargo Bank, who were offered various products, was positive as they were thought to be loyal customers. Nevertheless, the relationship was strained when the company lost focus on the customer and simply tried to sell more products to them. Employees had very tough targets to meet, and in order to do that, they had to be in a toxic work environment. The pressure reflected itself in different aspects, such as hourly meetings about sales targets and even the threats of termination for those who did not meet the target. This atmosphere created fear and a never-ending will to reach the goals, even if this meant engagement in unethical operations. The company culture had a customer-oriented focus that favored new client accounts more than ethical standards. This environment created a space where fraud and other ethical issues grew unchecked. Employees were forced to make up the accounts to meet the unattainable expectations, which consequently triggered the fabrication of millions of unauthorized accounts. The mistreatment, however, continued from about 2002 to 2016 when the scandal was exposed in the end. Many employees recognized the fact that it was the only way to fulfill the impossible demands and thus displayed the toxic culture of the bank at the time. Wells Fargo staff was doing everything in their power to fulfill sales objectives, including falsifying signatures and creating fake credit card accounts for customers. They didn't go with conventional approach, but they even signed up for homeless individuals and their own family members for accounts. In 2017, Wells Fargo publicly admitted that it had opened approximately 3.5 million counterfeit accounts, which was even more than they had initially thought. The approach, although exaggerated, nevertheless appeared to work in the company's favor. The former CEO John Stumpf followed the same strategy and may have become even more intense on it in 2005. In the company's 2010 annual report, Stumpf was glorifying how the number of products per customer was increasing. Thus, the goal is to have each household to have 8 products. Senator Elizabeth Warren was among those who criticized Wells Fargo for putting the goals of sales ahead of the customer's needs.
It's not because you ran the numbers and found that the average customer needed 8 banking accounts. Question, do you know how much the value of your stock went up while this scam was going on?
It's all of my compensation is in our public.
Do you know how much it was?
It's all in the public filing.
Oh, you're right, it is all in the public.
Apparently, she stated that the cross-selling process was not motivated by real customer demand, but it was actually the company's aim to increase their sales figures. This approach was only focused on making money and didn't pay attention to the customers, so it overlooked the ethics of business. The Wells Fargo Bank has been facing tough times since the scandal came out. They fired over 5,000 employees, and CEO John Stumpf, who was forced to give a testimony before the Congress, and Elizabeth Warren. Stumpf did not go to jail, but he was ousted from the position of CEO, and $41 million in compensation and $17 million fine followed him. However, he also accepted a lifetime ban from the banking industry in January 2020, which was announced. The pecuniary penalties were enormous, by means of which fines totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. In the month of September 2016, Wells Fargo was fined $185 million and a $142 million settlement that arose from a class action lawsuit in May 2018. In December 2018, they were held to pay a total of $1.055 billion from every state and a $480 million settlement with investors who alleged that they had been given fake reports and that financial statements were not accurate. Contrary to these steep fines, they probably were not so effective in the case of the Wells Fargo Bank, whose total assets amounted to $1 trillion and the net income, which was approximately $20 billion a year. While the Fed imposed a growth restriction on Wells Fargo until they improved governance and controls, the fact that they did so showed how serious their wrongdoing was. Even though being so big, the growth restrictions don't seem to be too harsh. In reality, it did set them back. In the past, they have increased that number nearly every year, and since 2016, they've remained there while their rivals have expanded around them. However, I believe that the loss of trust is their most significant effect. It's a bank, and in that regard, you're presented with several options. Millions, if not thousands, of individuals have already erred by placing their confidence in them. I'm not advocating that you avoid them, but it is something to think about and keep in mind. To their credit, they have now claimed that they no longer provide branch managers sales targets in the wake of the controversy. They created this advertisement with the message that you may trust them once more. John Stumpf has resigned from the firm, issued an apology, and acknowledged that taking full responsibility. I suppose you should simply have all of this in mind while interacting with Wells Fargo. Tell me in the comments how this controversy has changed your perception of Wells Fargo. This is by no means the only controversy or dubious event in their past. Since then, a number of other problems have surfaced, but this one seems to be the largest. Since this is such a complex topic, please feel free to share any additional ideas you may have in the comments section. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. I appreciate you saying.